As you watch this segment, think about what makes ships float and what caused the Titanic to sink. The Titanic was the pride of Belfast, Northern Ireland, where it was built. It was more than 50 meters tall and about 275 meters long. In its day, the Titanic was the largest moving object ever built. Its engines were 4 stories high, and each of its 3 propellers was larger than a house. Its anchors alone weighed 28,000 kilograms, as much as 20 cars. Yet, despite its incredible weight and the fact that it was constructed of steel, which is far heavier than water, the Titanic floated on the surface of the ocean, just like any other ship. 2 forces are at work on objects in the water, the buoyant force and gravity. Buoyant force is the upward force exerted on an object by the liquid that the object is in. The buoyant force pushes upward, while gravity pulls downward. When an object floats in a fluid, the buoyant force and the force of gravity are equal. As a result of these balanced up and down forces, the object is stationary. It moves neither up nor down. We're most familiar with floating on the surface, but the same principle applies to objects such as submarines and fish that can float below the surface. Although the Titanic had a mass of millions of kilograms, its huge hull, made of 16 separate air-filled compartments, made the Titanic's overall density less than the density of water. But when the Titanic hit the iceberg, this balance was altered. As seawater poured into the front 5 compartments, it displaced the air that had been filling the compartments. Since water is much heavier than air, the density of the front of the ship increased enormously. Soon, the pull of gravity on the increasingly heavy front of the ship overcame its buoyant force, and the front of the ship began to sink. Recent expeditions to the wreckage have shed light on what happened next. These expeditions have allowed structural engineers to make detailed computer simulations of the Titanic's final moments. The stresses within the ship are shown with a spectrum of colors. Red represents the most severe. This first graphic shows the stresses on the Titanic in calm seas.
I don't see very many stresses in that.
But as the wounded ship fills with water, the stresses in the midsection increase dramatically.
Wow, what is that?
This is the ship just prior to breakup. It's taken on a lot of water in the bow, and that rapid change causes the stresses to increase.
So basically our ship is bending. Forward end of the ship is flooded. The top part of the ship is pulling apart in tension. The bottom or the keel of the ship is compressing, and the steel plates in the keel are actually buckling.
As the bow pulls down, the huge stern rises in the air, the equivalent of a 25-story building suddenly looming above the water.
The stresses that we have in the deck are on the order of 35,000 pounds per square inch. And that's about 50% higher than what the Titanic was actually designed for.
The tremendous weight difference between the front and rear of the ship produced stresses that finally overcame the ship's steel structure. The computer model helped support eyewitness testimony that the Titanic broke in 2.
I heard explosions, a sort of rumbling sound. I imagined the decks had blown up with the pressure pulling the boat down. Major Arthur Prusham.
You could see a propeller right clear. And you could see underneath the keel. You could see part of the keel. Joseph Scarrett.
And her lights went dim as she broke clean in 2. Steward, Frederick Crowe.
One of the greatest ships ever built was destroyed in a matter of hours, broken in two by the incredible physical forces that had built up inside it. Today, the remains of the Titanic rest on the ocean floor. But by understanding what caused the ship to sink, we can learn new ways to build better and safer ships. Which forces have to be in balance in order for an object to float?